Okay, welcome, welcome, welcome. We see two viewers here. We'll give it another few seconds for us to start. Okay, I see three viewers. Welcome. Okay. So welcome everyone to another episode of Civility Wins. We are excited to be filming part one of a two-part series, Civility Wins Women's History Month special. My name is Kristen Goss, co-author of Civility Wins, Find Your Peace While Taming the Beasts, and co-host of this phenomenal YouTube channel.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us tonight. We definitely appreciate your presence. We ask you to please subscribe to our channel, click the notification bell so you'll be notified when we go live again next week, Monday, the 28th, for part two of the series. I am Sandy Boisrond. I'm one half of Civility Wins. We are basically an organization that strives to educate not only attorneys, but young professionals on how to maintain civility no matter what comes your way. So tonight's conversation, we're talking Women's History Month, a look at women then, now, and in the future. And we have a wonderful panel of guests who have volunteered their time to speak with us tonight. So again, click the subscribe button, make sure that you are following our channel, and you can also follow us on Instagram at Civility Wins Series. Back to you, Kristen.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sandy. All right. So we're here, as Sandy said, with a few friends and colleagues. Before we get into the program, I'd like to give a brief overview of the topic. So we are here for Women's History Month. I would like to give a little bit of background of myself. I am the daughter of a social worker and a pastor who also worked for the Broward County School Board as the director of the maintenance department until he retired in the late 90s. My mother grew up during segregation in a small town in North Carolina called Enfield, Rocky Mount, North Carolina. She attended Livingstone College and obtained her Bachelor of Science in social work. She did not see integration until her sophomore year of college, which was actually, I want to say, 1971. She attended Howard University in Washington, D.C., and obtained her Master's of Social Work there. She pledged Alpha Kappa Alpha Incorporated sorority. She was the first African-American female captain on her Air Force base in North Carolina. She traveled the world and lived in various places. She worked for the Miami Veterans Administration and also the Oakland Park Veterans Administration, so it was called back then, for over 30 years, and she retired in 2003. My father had several businesses and was also a landlord. His background was in construction, and he built numerous homes in the Broward County area. I attended Fort Lauderdale Christian School from kindergarten through 12th grade. I was actually the only Black person in my graduating class in 2003. I was a salutatorian of my class, and I attended the University of Miami in Coral Gables, Florida, go Canes, and majored in communication studies and political science with a minor in Spanish. I then attended the Thomas M. Cooley Law School in Lansing, Michigan. Was the first time ever seeing snow in the Four Seasons. My concentration was in litigation. I graduated in May of 2010. And 2 days before graduating, actually, my mother passed away of uterine cancer. Thereafter, from 2010 to 2014, I was the caregiver for my father for 4 years. My husband and I moved in with him to assist him his last 2.5 years. He did pass away in September of 2014 of prostate cancer. During the time I was his primary caregiver, I obtained my Series 6 and life insurance licenses and was a financial advisor for a few years. I took the Florida bar in February of 2014, and I have been practicing as a family law attorney since then. I will leave the remainder of my journey for part two, but I did want to highlight this one thing as an introduction into the theme as to why we're here. Um, it's the fact that I am the product of hardworking parents who, despite the struggles that were placed on them due to the American society at that time, and during the time they grew up, they raised me to know who I am as a person and encouraged me to never give up on my goals, regardless of who or what may attempt to discourage me. They raised me to be a proud Black woman in America. And I am here today to say cheers to all of the women in America and internationally who have made great strides in the past to allow for the possibilities that I am able to reap the benefits of, including my mother, rest her soul, Martha A. Arrington Walker. And at this time, I want to just turn it over to my co-author, Sandy Boisrond.
Thank you so much for that, Kristen. Definitely appreciate your background. My name is Sandy Boisrond. I am an estate planning attorney. I was licensed to practice back in 2015. I am the product of two Haitian parents who came to the United States in the 70s. I was born in the Northeast and moved down to sunny South Florida as a toddler. And I learned very early on some of the struggles of, not only women, but particularly immigrant women here in the United States. It took a number of years before my mother became a full-fledged resident of the United States after coming to this country at a very young age. And in going through my school years, for many instances throughout the years, I was the sometimes only Black child in certain classes, and I learned a lot about certain dynamics. And listening to this topic of Women's History Month, it hits hard for me. My mom raised us as a single parent for many, many years. And a lot of the struggles that she went through are the things that make me who I am today. I actually went through all of my schooling here in South Florida, from elementary school to middle school and high school. And then I went to the University of Miami, go Canes, and later on got my degree from the Thomas M. Cooley Law School in Michigan, where, much like Kristen, that was the first time I lived in snow, period, and experienced four seasons. But my education at Thomas M. Cooley Law School gave me a great background in solo and small firm practice, as well as an understanding of estate planning at its bare basics. And it also instilled in me the opportunity to give back to the community and provide some information to families in my community in particular. As a woman, thinking about Women's History Month and thinking about my upbringing, I learned the value of hard work. I learned the value of education. My mother was very, very big on education. She was very big on reading at a young age. So much so people always would say, "Oh, I speak so well." And while that may sound to some as a compliment, it's really not. It's actually a bit concerning that someone would think that a person who went to school to get an education could not at least put, sentences together. But I think some of the experiences that we go through as children frame, who we are and what we're all about and how we go through life. And so it's really great today for us to be able to have this conversation during Women's History Month. So I'm going to keep it short this week. Next week, I'll talk a little bit more about my background. I'm going to kick it back to you, Kristen, so we can do introductions.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I am excited because we have, as Sandy mentioned earlier, a panelist that, is going to knock your socks off, I would say. I'm just excited to have them here. And thank you so much to all of them for volunteering their time. At this time, want to call up Robert J. Merlin, Esquire, to tell us a little bit about his background.
Hi, Kristen. Thank you for including me in this. I'm really honored to be a part of it. I'm a second generation Miamian. I grew up in North Miami, went to North Miami High, then went to the University of Florida for undergrad, and I have a law degree from the University of Florida as well. I was admitted to practice law in Florida in 1979, pretty long ago. When I'm a product of divorced parents, And when I went to law school, there was only one class I was not going to take, and that was family law, because I knew I was never going to practice family law. And of course, you know me personally, Kristen, all I do is family law. But I'm a little bit different from most family attorneys. I used to be a very tough litigator, but I knew there was a better way to represent families than going to court and putting everything in the public record and empowering a stranger, a judge, to make decisions that affected the family for the rest of their lives. I learned about the collaborative process in 2003, and since then I started getting more and more into it, and now I am very dedicated to the collaborative process. I train professionals how to use the collaborative process. I write about it. I spent 10 years getting statutes and rules passed through the Florida legislature and the Florida Supreme Court. I am on the board and I'm treasurer of the International Academy of Collaborative Professionals, and I'm the president of the Florida Academy of Collaborative Professionals, of which you're a member as well, Kristen, as is one of our other speakers, my good friend Kim. So I'm looking forward to this conversation and talking about women's roles in my area of the law and my observations, and talking about how things have changed. My mother was a very strong influence in my life. She was the one who pushed me educationally, I would say, and taught me so much, and I owe so much to her. That's enough for me.
Oh, thank you so much, Bob. I have to say this before I call in our next guest. He is one of my biggest mentors in the collaborative law arena, and he's responsible, one of the trailblazers for the passage of the 2016 collaborative law statute in Florida. So thank you so much, Bob, for your dedication and commitment to seeing the family law arena move forward in a positive direction. At this time, I'd like to call next Fernanda Pedroso, another good friend and colleague, to introduce herself.
Hi, Kristen and Sandy. Thank you for having me. My name's Fernanda Pedroso. I'm a first-generation American. Both my parents immigrated from Colombia 40 plus years ago. I attended Florida International University, where I majored in international relations and minored in sociological and anthropological studies. I attended Nova Law School, graduated in 2014. And like Bob, and because of Bob, most likely, I'm a collaborative family law attorney. Back when he was starting, I was in high school, so I always owe a debt of gratitude for him doing everything he did, because I'm able to practice family law in the way that I envisioned based on my family dynamic, and in a way that, prior to that law and prior to that concept, wouldn't have been possible. So that's all for me.
Thank you, Fernanda. I'd like to say, just enjoy working with Fernanda as well in the collaborative law arena, and thank you for being here. Next, we will have Vivian Fazio.
Hi, Kristen. How are you?
Hi.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be a part of this. I am a first-generation Cuban American. My parents immigrated to the United States from Cuba. I grew up in Fort Lauderdale when there were no Cubans around, which probably seems really, really strange to say now, because there really weren't any. I went to school and I was foreign in that sense. People would look at my parents like they had three heads, because they just didn't understand, culturally very different than what most people were used to. So that was interesting, of course, very different today. And then I attended high school here locally at St. Thomas Aquinas High School, where both of my daughters have now been fortunate to attend. And I went to the University of Florida for my undergrad and came back home to Nova to get my law degree. I was up in, if any of you remember, up in Gainesville for the Gainesville murders. So I was pretty anxious to leave there. It happened in the beginning of my junior year, and wasn't even sure I was going to complete my time there because of it. But kind of soldiered through, graduated actually a semester early from undergrad, and then came here and ultimately went to law school. So that's been my journey. I have been practicing since 1996. I was sworn into the bar, fun fact, on Halloween, October 31st, 1996, by a very old a retired judge at the time, Judge Franza, who has since passed away. So that was kind of fun. And since then, I've practiced in always civil law, but a combination of personal injury law, commercial litigation. So I've handled a wide variety of cases in the civil arena. I serve as both the as far as family dynamics, I guess you mentioned a little bit about your parents. My father was a civil engineer. He worked for the city of Fort Lauderdale. My mother held a variety of administrative positions. Her longest tenure, which was for quite some time before she retired, was with Travelers Insurance Company. So, interesting background there. Education was always very important to my parents, and they were pleased that I chose law school. As far as today, I have my own practice. I had started out with probably a mid-sized firm, was there for a number of years, and then branched out on my own. I am currently the president of the Broward County Women Lawyers Association, and also sit on the Judicial Nominating Commission, where I'm fortunate enough to be able to vet candidates for judicial office and interview them, and then make recommendations to the governor for appointment of any vacancies.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Vivian. She's another mentor of mine that I am honored to know. At this time, we're going to have Gary Luima come and introduce himself.
Good evening, everybody, and thanks again for having me this evening. My name is Gary B. Luima. I'm a corporate attorney, a Broward County native, born and raised in Broward County. I went to Florida International University for my undergrad, where I majored in political science and international relations. Then I matriculated to Florida A&M, where I received my law degree. And right out of law school, I went forward and started my own firm. I practice corporate law as well as trademark law. And I'm just very excited to be here this evening. And also, I'm a first generation Haitian American, and just resonating with the other guests as far as different cultures coming in and speaking about their experiences this evening. So thanks again for having me.
Thank you, Gary. Pleased to have you with us. Okay, and last but not least, of course, we have Kim Nutter.
Good evening. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be on here tonight and with such an esteemed panel. So I am an attorney practicing primarily in the South Florida area. My area of practice is primarily family law with specialty of collaborative law, like many of the people on here tonight. I also do a lot of mediation and also do a lot of work as a guardian ad litem for children in the family law area. I am myself, I haven't thought about it this way in a long time, but I myself am an immigrant. I came here at 5 years old from Taiwan. I came here with my mother and my stepfather and made it over to Florida and have lived here in the South Florida area doing all of my education down here. I have been a lawyer in South Florida since 1987. And like Bob, unlike Bob, I did take family law in law school, but like Bob, I had no intention of practicing family law. And I started out doing a lot of commercial work and actually securities litigation. And be it as it may, somehow or another, I found myself doing family law. And then because family law, I think, requires involvement, which I think women in particular are good at, is getting involved in communities and involved in what they do. And by getting involved, you become involved in things such as the collaborative group. You become involved in the family law section. You become involved in the Florida chapter of the Association of Family Courts and Conciliatory. And all of those things bring us together as a community and allows us to reach out and get to know other people of all walks of life, which really can only benefit us individually, ourselves and our family, and in our community. And so I'm looking forward to further discussions tonight.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kim. Really honored to have you as well on this panel. At this time, I know there are like 10 million questions I have for all of you, but I do see that we are, we want to kind of make this within the hour. So what I am going to do at first is just ask each of you one question, and then I'll turn it over to Sandy. I think Sandy may have some general questions based on our topics for Women's History Month. All right. So I'll start with Bob. My question specifically for you is, I could be wrong, but I would assume, and I know they say don't really assume, but I'm going to assume that there weren't a lot of male attorneys when you started to practice law. And so I guess my question would be, is that true? Did you find that to be the case? And have things changed today compared to back then when you first started practicing law?
When I started practicing, there were very few female attorneys, and they were, in my personal opinion, mistreated, disrespected, looked down upon by some. I think there were some, especially older men, who resented women being there. It's interesting because I can remember a female associate in my first job who told me that she refused to learn how to type because there was no way she wanted to have someone tell her to go type something. She wanted to make sure that people knew she was an attorney. Almost every attorney handling family matters was a male, and now it's completely different. And we know that more females are going to college, more females are going to law school. And my personal opinion is that practicing family law resonates more with women than with men. I think it's just a natural tendency. There's also some flexibility. A vast majority of family attorneys have small offices, and a number of us on this call have our own office. And when you do that, you have flexibility, including being able to go and take care of your kids if you need to. My wife is a professional. She took kids to work with her. She's not an attorney, but times have changed dramatically, and I'm happy for it.
Awesome. Thank you, Bob. Let's see, who can I go to? Fernanda. This kind of ties into what Bob mentioned about seeing his wife and other women taking their kids to work. And then I know, and I can say this because I consider myself a geriatric millennial in two ways. Number one, I guess age on the, end part of it. And then also I hate technology. So with that said, being a millennial, do you believe that it's important to have a work-life balance? And do you think that's something that is specific to millennials, or do you think that's just the trend in general?
I do think it's specific to millennials. I think that for a long time we got this bad reputation about there's the generations that came before us that said things like work hard or play hard or first in and last one out of the office. And I genuinely think that's a sad way to view work because your life shouldn't all be work. And I think the millennials were the first generation that were not satisfied with their life being work. And I think after that, the trend has been, do what makes you happy. And part of that is being educated and reaching self-actualization, but it's also, eating well and diet and exercise and having time for yourself, like to read a book or just enjoy your life. And it's not all about work. So I do think that having a work-life balance is very important. And a work-life balance, depending on your age, can be different things. I have a sister who's she's 29, and it's not. I'm 34, so it's not that big of a difference, but it really is. They're like right at the cusp of how millennials perceive themselves and then how they perceive themselves. But her work-life balance is, going to work, having time to go to a book club, having time to try exercise, and my work-life balance is being able to, take care of my son and do things with my husband. So I think that every generation needs a work-life balance for whatever it is that they're experiencing at that time.
Good stuff. Thank you. I'm going to stop here really quick because I see a question in the chat. It says, what's the key to maintaining civility during divorce when it's such a highly emotionally charged experience? So I will leave that question to any of the panelists to answer.
I'll give you my perspective. I think a lot of family attorneys, especially men, think that you have to beat up the other side and you destroy the other side and the last person standing wins. If you do what's in the best interest of your client and especially their children, then you're going to practice differently, you're going to communicate differently, think differently, and naturally civility will come to your practice. Instead of focusing on, I want to win this case, focus on how can we best help this family get to the best possible position they can be in, given that they're going through a significant transition and life is going to be different for all of them.
I like that, Bob. Thank you. Let's see here. We'll go to Vivian. I know that you are on the Judicial Nomination Commission, and of course that helps get judges appointed in Broward County. If you could just please give a brief explanation as to what that entails and why you decided to take on that role. Oh, you're on mute.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I decided to take on that role. Well, I had to apply first and be nominated by the Florida Bar, and then the Florida Bar, similar to what we do, sends the names to the governor, and then the governor selects from there. So I was appointed to that position, and I decided to apply because I just felt I had had a lot of experience being in front of a lot of different judges throughout the state of Florida, because my practice had been statewide, still is, but was much more so at that time. Or prior to that. And I had seen a variety of different judges. And of course, we'd had some issues here locally with judges. And I just thought it was important to be involved and to have a say in the people that were coming through and would ultimately want to serve as judges. I will say that I've been very pleased with the process. I was a little concerned that maybe things weren't, just from things I had heard, that, it's sort of behind the black curtain and things are different than they should be. And I have to say, I've been very pleased with the way the process has gone. There are lengthy applications, which, Kristen, as you know, that you have to go through and fill out and provide lots of references and cases that you've been involved in and mediations that you've been involved in, and identify the parties, the attorneys on each side. So we know everyone who, you've been in contact with primarily for at least a period of time. And we do pretty thorough vetting. We contact everyone on your application. We go through and, speak to judges independently about applicants. We go through and, find things online. I mean, we really are rather thorough. Usually each person is assigned 2 people to vet, but we all, collectively vet people as well. And then we all are responsible for interviewing the candidates. And that's always interesting. Usually by the time you've vetted a candidate or you've reviewed their application thoroughly and spoken to others about them, you often have a pretty good idea about who they are. But it's always nice to hear from the candidates. And I can say, honestly, sometimes the interviews do push you one way or the other, depending on the questions asked and the responses given, or just, the general demeanor of the applicant. I've seen people come through multiple times, and I can say some people are pretty much the same every time or do great every time. And then there's some people that do noticeably different each time. Sometimes, you see people improving with each time they come through. Sometimes you see people, just have kind of a bad day one year or one opportunity when they come through, and then they're back to their normal the next time. So it's an interesting process, and we are almost always unanimous in our findings of who should ultimately be sent up to the governor. So it's interesting to see that we're in such agreement about the people that are ultimately sent up to the governor for consideration. And I just think it's a very rewarding thing to be involved in, to be able to learn about each individual candidate and why it is that they want to be a judge, and what they feel brings them the skills and the experience and the know-how to do the job and do it well.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Vivian. Gary. Okay. So you mentioned that you're first generation Haitian American. And so my question to you would be, what are the cultural differences you've witnessed for women in America compared to Haitian women or women with a Haitian cultural background, if any?
Great question. I saw that firsthand. Maybe with my mother, and I also have an older sister. So expectation in the Haitian culture traditionally, it's a patriarchy for the most part, and women are supposed to take care of the home, take care of children, things of that nature. But then when you add in the dynamic with the reason most Haitians come to America is for better life education. That's not exclusive to just men. Of course, women are partaking in that as well, but they still have to take on the same traditional roles. So with that, it's just a lot of pressure as far as just seeing what my sister still getting the push to, yeah, you should go to school, get your education, and do this and be that, but you still need to learn how to take care of a household and do this and do all the house chores, things of that nature. There's more emphasis on that as well, as opposed to growing around in American culture. Just in a space where women have more choices as far as, if they don't want to partake in the housework, they can just focus on the career, or they can have both, or they can have one or the other. Just a little more leeway as far as how women can move. I just see in the Haitian culture, women can be a little more limited as far as that mindset. But it's great to see Haitian Americans, especially millennials, pushing past that, breaking those barriers. Breaking those double standards as well, and making strides in their careers. So it's really great to see.
Awesome. Thank you, Gary. Kim. So I'll ask you this question regarding your viewpoint on women in politics. What's your viewpoint?
My viewpoint on women in politics, right?
Yes.
Well, you've heard me say one of my favorite quotes by, ED, which is, women belong in places where all decisions are made. So that's my view on women in politics. Honestly, women have to become more involved in politics at all levels. It's one of probably the last places which there really is a lot of men involved in that. And so, if we have legislation that affects all the way down, on every level. And so therefore, for differences to be made, you have to have the grassroots. Many of us involved on this panel right here have been involved. Bob knows it took him years and years to get the collaborative process through. We've all seen, how ugly it is to make the sausage and how long it takes. And therefore, women do need to get involved if they really want to see things such as, more consideration for childcare, those kind of things that affect all of us. And as Gary was just saying, talking about, the fact that, women still are viewed as, yes, definitely go out, be successful and probably you're going to play mom too a lot of the time. And those balances that, the topic of so many articles. So, people should get involved, but women need to get involved in politics. I don't like politics, but women need to get involved.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kim. I'm going to turn this part over to my co-author and co-host Sandy for some more general questions, and then I do see some questions in the chat, and we'll get to that after we do our general questions.
Awesome. I love this. So I'm gonna start with the perspective of the men on this one. When we think back in history over different women's movements, women's suffrage, feminist movements, all of these shifts in trying to gain some equality for women, not only in the workplace but in the household. Um, do you feel that women are, I would say, maintaining traditional roles in this day and age? Or do you feel like we're trying to shift back? We're trying to shift completely into this idea of, the independent woman, the woman that is of the workforce. And I'm going to start with you, Bob.
I don't think you can paint with a broad brush. It depends upon the individual. Um, Compared to when I started practicing law, there are a lot more opportunities for women. It used to be that a woman could not be a partner in a large law firm because she was going to get pregnant and she was going to stop working. And that was the assumption. And I don't think that exists anymore. And there have been women who have been the top managing partner in very large law firms. For some people, being at home works great. I know people who got advanced degrees and they don't use it anymore because where their heart is and where they want to be is at home with their family. Others manage to balance it and do some of everything. So some of you have had children while you're working, Kristen, and you're able to do everything and balance all the balls. That's my perspective.
Thank you so much for that, Bob. Gary, being a Haitian American like myself, you and I both know our Haitian people. They're very much big believers of, I guess, what we can quote, air quote, traditional female roles in the household. How do you feel that, as millennials, as younger folks, how do you feel that things are shifting in the Haitian community?
As with any movement, it helps when the other side is part of the movement as well. I'm seeing a lot more men being more supportive, even whether it be through protests or even in different households, being more supportive of the women taking on different roles and picking up the slack. So traditionally in the Haitian household, women are the primary caregiver, but I'm seeing a lot more Haitian men, pick up the child from daycare and change the diapers and and cook as well. And enjoy cooking at that as well. So there, it has to be both. It has to be a team effort. At the same time, that balance definitely depends on the couple and the individual's preferences. I am seeing a lot more spaces for women to uh, pursue and live a life that they want on their terms, as opposed to the social constructs that already exist, whether it be a housewife, or getting rid of the household altogether and just strictly focusing on career. So you can definitely balance it and plug and play how you like a lot more. Through the years.
Thank you so much for that, Gary. I'm going to go to you, Kim. When we think of the role of culture on how we interact in a household and what, the gender roles are, from your perspective, from your background, what are the women's roles and how do you think they're shifting now in 2022?
Well, my background being I had the benefit of a very, very strong mother, a woman who focused on raising very strong children. And that is also how I see my family in Taiwan raising their children and their, raising their families. So I think that as I've grown up, particularly down here and gone through, all my levels of education, um, it's interesting. I see a lot of women striving to want to be equals. Other women, either kind of still wanting a little bit more of the role of wanting to be able to stay back and give a lot more attention to children. So I think we are still in a generation where there's a lot more struggle with the balance. But I think that because of where we are, for example, I have a brother. So, as Gary was saying, he was raised in a different era. So he is much more hands on. And I think, that's what's going to bring forward change all the way around.
Thank you for that, Kim. Definitely appreciate your feedback on this. I'm going to go now to Fernanda. Culturally speaking, what are your thoughts on this traditional gender roles and maybe the shifts in what's going on with women today?
So culturally, my parents, like I mentioned, they're Colombian, and my mom was like the person who cooked and then handled the finances, but then she could also change the tire. And my dad is just more like a hippie, and just like very, very happy-go-lucky. And so I never had that image of like, well, men take care of women. It was more like my mom takes care of us all, and it was more of a personality thing. But then when kids come around and they're babies, my mom was like very present mom, and my dad wasn't there, but standing behind my mom. So I think it was a generational thing. But at least in what I've seen with women in my family, the women have always really been at the forefront, making the decisions, calling the shots. But then my husband is Colombian, Cuban American, and he could not be more different than what my father was like. I'm pretty sure if there's like a diaper count, he's changed them the most. He does do more of the cooking. And, it's not about, well, you're female, so you should be doing this. It's more like we're both in this together. We both had children. I will say I did carry the heavier weight because he can't physically have children. But I think that if he could, he would have taken that on too. And I think because I think that's how millennials, whether you're, first generation American or you've been here for a while, I think that you do look at relationships as more equitable, and you don't want to abuse the relationship. And that means in turn not abusing the other gender. And so I think that we've just gone to a place where you respect the relationship, and that means maybe you're doing a little bit more of what my father didn't do. And it's important for our relationship. So I think it's cultural, but I think it's also generational.
Definitely appreciate that response, Fernando. When you were saying that, I kept thinking about my mom, and I'm like, my mom does a little bit of everything, but somehow she's still traditional in the sense of, she wants, to do the cooking and the cleaning, but at the same time, she might be able to do some painting and some other, other housework that you probably don't think is for women. In thinking about this and moving to Vivian, what are you seeing in your culture that impacts women's roles both in the household and in the workforce? Let me see if Vivian can hear me. Oops, sorry.
Sorry. I think it's changed a lot as well. I think, definitely it used to be much more the machismo, thing of the male, did the male role, and the female was relegated to doing everything for the children. And, and in some cases, maybe not encouraged to work as much, but now more so. But then there came that point of, well, you're supposed to do everything. So I think it's shifted. I think, and I think what Fernanda said is correct. Is it just generational? I think in large part, and cultural, but largely generational. I think it's just it had to happen because women can't succeed if they don't. I mean, they can, but it's really difficult. They really can't reach their full potential. Let's put it that way, without a man, a supportive partner, or whether that's a man or a woman or whatever it is. But to have a supportive partner by your side who's going to help in the day-to-day life battles, whether it's with children or anything else, maintaining a home and all the different things that can happen. So it's nice to see that the tide is turning. I think that it's only going to help like Fernanda said, relationships in general succeed and our society.
Thank you so much for that, Vivian. I'm going to go ahead and switch back to Kristen for a couple more questions, and then I'll come back with a few things to talk about women and some political issues.
Okay. I see this question here in the chat. It says, for each panelist, why is it important that civility wins? So I'll ask Bob this question, since we're kind of doing a circular thing with the panelists. Why do you think it's important that civility wins, Bob?
I actually think it's a matter of life and death. I tell people that I think I'm going to live longer because I'm not litigating anymore, and I'm using the collaborative process, and I mediate and direct negotiations, and I prepare a lot of prenuptial and postnuptial agreements. Fighting, arguing, and getting your blood boiling is not good for the attorney. It's self-destructive. And so it may be a selfish perspective, but if you're more civil, you will be more effective. You'll enjoy the practice more, and I think you'll be healthier and live longer.
Thank you, Bob. I'm going to ask Vivian the same question. Why do you think it's important that civility wins?
Well, I do agree with what Bob said, but I also think that it's important for our society as a whole and for our children, for our families, and for the world, really, because look at look at what we're dealing with in the world, unfortunately. And if we could just all employ a little more civility in our day-to-day life, our personal relationships with one another. And, it's not always easy because we're dealing with so many different things coming at us at once. And, there are times where, I was just talking to a friend the other day, and we were talking about sometimes even our reactions with our children. And we know in our mind what the best way to react is. And we try to employ that all the time, but there are those times where too many things are just taking over, and you're unfortunately not able to be your best self and react the way you would like to. So it's a skill. I think you have to practice it, and I think it's super important in all contexts of society, but especially as lawyers, I think we're held to a higher standard, and we need to set the bar, and it begins with us. And you see our judges, they hate seeing attorneys bickering with one another. They absolutely hate it. Every judge you go before will comment on that. And I'm in these motion calendars sometimes, and I see it happening, and I see the judges getting frustrated. So I think it's just very, very important from the top down. I think that's being instilled, and I think we need to teach our younger lawyers that too, so that we can all raise the bar a little higher.
Oh, awesome. Great stuff. Thank you, Vivian. I do see another question that I want to pose to the panelists. It says, do you think female attorneys approach how they handle cases differently than male attorneys? And if so, why? So I will ask Gary for a male perspective, and then I'll ask Kim for a woman perspective.
I believe I'm the only non-family law attorney here. So I'm in the corporate space. I do come across some women in the business corporate space, also intellectual property space as well, or on the other side of the V. And I would say there's no difference. I don't approach any case as far as there's a man, it's a woman, they're going to act any different. The women attorneys I've come across have all had a high degree of professionalism, extremely competent, and I have no higher bar or lower bar, whether it be male or female, as an attorney. We all take an oath to represent our clients to the best of our ability, zealously, and I've seen that across the board. With that, I would say, for the most part, women tend to be more organized in that space. But outside of that, I'm not seeing too much of a drop off or a take up. We're all competent professionals, and I'll love to see it.
Great answer, Gary. Great answer. Okay, Kim, what do you have to say about that?
Well, I tend to agree. I think it has a lot more to do with maybe years of experience. I think that generally that women tend to be very detail oriented. So you will see that more in the drafting at times. But I think when you have and you reach certain really depth of experiences, that you're not going to really see, that kind of difference in gender. It's the experience that they all bring to the table.
Awesome. All right, I'll turn this back over to you, Sandy.
Okay, great. So we're going to talk a little politics now, and I'll try to reserve a couple of questions for each person. So I wanted to talk hair politics, and before I talk about this topic, I would like to just kind of let you know about this civility wins concept. Kristen and I were involved in what we would call some trifecta type cases where there were three different cases that kind of came into one situation. And both of us were the attorneys on the different cases that we were dealing with. And we decided to write this book called Civility Wins: Find Your Peace While Taming the Beast, because there were so many scenarios that we went through in our early years of practice and during the pendency of the cases that we were dealing with together as co-counsel, that we could not help ourselves but to write this guide to help others understand how to respond in different situations. And I like that the question was posed about how, men and women may respond to cases. We had similar situations of lack of civility from both men and women. So it wasn't even like it was mostly women or mostly men. We just had some very, really combative type situations. And Kristen and I would just sit there and talk to each other like, I don't even see the reason for this. Like, simple conversation can be had because we're just having an interaction in a case. We're not adversaries individually. So when I think about some things that deal with women in, politics, women in industries, women in law, hair politics has always come up. So I wanted to know your thoughts because Kristen and I have worn our hair, of course, in very different styles over the years. And we know that recently the Crown Act has come forward in talking about the way that, Black women would wear their hair. What are your thoughts on hair politics and this issue of what hair is professional versus non-professional? And I want to start with you, Fernanda. Do you have in your culture or in your experiences any issues with hair and professionalism?
I haven't had issues with hair, but it's because my hair just is what it is. It's very tameable, and so I can make it be whatever I want it to be. And no one's, fortunately for me, no one's ever had anything to say about my particular hair. But I've had this conversation before, and it happened around the time that Meghan Markle and Prince Harry were getting married. And I knew people that had issues with the way Meghan Markle's mom's hair was. And they're like, oh, she couldn't even do her hair for the event. And I thought, that's such a Eurocentric way of viewing that concept, because no one's telling, when Queen Elizabeth would go to Africa during her tours, no one told her to blow out her hair a certain way because she was going to Africa. She was just allowed to have her hair the way her hair was. So I think it's annoying, and it's really infuriating when you would require someone whose hair just is what it is, and then someone has decided that the standard is different, or the beauty standard or the professional standard, and you can't really change innately what your hair does. So, I mean, personally, I think whatever your hair does, it should be allowed to do. And if you know what you're saying and you went to school and you have your degree, you should be able to do whatever you want, and no one should have really any opinion on your hair, because no one ever has an opinion on your hair if you're white. So why should you have an opinion on someone's hair when they're not white?
I definitely appreciate your response. And that Meghan Markle situation is very reminiscent of things that I hear, especially in the legal profession. I'm going to go to you, Gary. What are your thoughts on this conversation about hair politics and whether or not there's a particular standard for hair in the workplace?
It definitely is a standard. For the most part, I haven't had, at least in my professional career or later educational career, advanced education career, I haven't had any crazy hair phases or anything of that nature. But I do have colleagues, who grow their hair out, whether it be dreads, um, or just different styles, especially with women, different like cornrows or braids, box braids, and a million different styles as well. Now, sorry, got tongue tied, but I do have a colleague who made a decision to cut his hair, cut his dreads, to be more marketable for jobs. There's always that fear of will I be accepted in this space because around like 5% of attorneys are black. So if you are going to a law firm, whether it be a mid to large law firm, majority of people there are not going to look like you. But you still want to fit into the firm's culture, and a lot of times we sacrifice our hair to blend in, have clean cut, not make any waves, just to be quote unquote employable. So it's not really about um, your your talents, your ability. Is more about how you look and how you present yourself. So I mean, I'm happy now legislation is being passed to protect that, and hopefully in our communities we can take that burden off of our back, and of course remain professional and have great hairstyles. But it will allow us to express ourselves as our hair is just so amazing. So does a lot of different things. So we'll be allowed to do that now.
Definitely appreciate that, Gary. And I'm glad you mentioned the locks issue because I started my locks in law school. And I can think of a couple of professors that had question marks about whether or not my hair was professional enough. And it was interesting because just because I have locks doesn't mean I can't style my hair. And I would look at how I would change my hair for different environments because obviously, if I'm going to an interview, I'm going to wear my hair in one style versus if I'm, hanging out or studying and things like that. But it was interesting to me to see my professors' responses. And I'm not talking about other professors. I'm talking about professors that look like me. Were like, you think you really want to do that? I'm like, ma'am, I'm in my 30s. I don't have time for whatever it is that someone's going to tell me right now. By the time I'm getting into the law practice, I'm going to be in my 40s. So I'm really not going to care about someone's opinion. But I thank you for that, Gary. That brings up a really great point. Kristen, I'm going to throw it back to you. I know we don't have too much more left in time. So we're going to kind of skim through a couple of questions. Kristen, go ahead.
All right. I want to kind of touch on the pay difference between male and female, if you don't mind. I was doing this research the other day and I came across this quote that says the average American woman earns 81% of what an average American man earns, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And this stark disparity has hardly budged for more than a decade. The pay gap between men and women has sat at 80 to 83% since 2004. So I will go to, let's say, Kim. Is this something that you find is true in your profession, that there is a difference in pay between men and women?
So I can say I have had, in my experience, no. I've had the benefit of working for different size law firms. I'm with a good size firm now. I've been with a firm before that was international and had 77 equity partners and smaller four-man shops and such. But I think, we're a unique group because you're lawyers and you're competing and there's criterias. So I'd like to think that if you're in this kind of a setting and, there's, and the criteria are being met. So where I have been, I have not had that experience. But, you hear about it out there. You hear about it more than you'd like to hear about it in other corporate settings outside the legal world. Yeah, I certainly see that more.
Okay. How about you, Bob?
Well, it's certainly a lot better than it used to be. I know that women were being paid at different rates than men. Now, I have a small firm. The most I've had is one associate at a time. And it has nothing to do with what sex someone was. It was more of a question of what I could afford to pay. And if they would bring in business, then generate more income for themselves. So the times are changing, and I'm not in a position to say they've changed completely. I just know that there's been a change
Awesome.
for the positive.
Okay. I will leave. I have, I'd like to hear each of you as panelists, like closing remarks, but I want to turn it back over to Sandy. I don't know if there's any other question that you wanted to ask.
Okay, so let me make sure that I didn't miss something in the chat. Okay, I didn't miss anything in the chat. So one thing I wanted to touch on before we closed out is just a little fun topic. Women in music. You know, when I think about my upbringing and the dynamics of women in the music industry, the way that they looked, the way that they dressed, the sound, the content of the music, I felt like there was a lot more diversity in the content, and I also felt like there was a lot of diversity in the different styles and attitudes of women in the music industry back then. Although I do feel like back then there was a lot of difficulty for women in the music industry. Whereas now I feel like women do have more of a prominent role a bit, in terms of having some success in the music industry and being a forefront type artist. But I do feel like a little bit of the content has shifted gears. Women have taken control of their sexuality and other things a little bit more than I would like. But I would like your thoughts on this. I know that we all may have different musical tastes. And I'll start with you, Fernanda. What are your thoughts on women in music and some of the changes from maybe when you were growing up to what you see now as the visuals?
So I grew up, and like the I guess the biggest woman in music when I was growing up was Britney Spears, and then my personal deity is Beyonce. So when you compare them two, it's really different. Like they came out around the same time, and then you have one that just ended a conservatorship, and then you have another who's like, you know, just like she's an artist, Beyonce. That I think that when you compare generationally, like who was the biggest pop star, I don't know, 30, 40 years ago, it could have been Michael Jackson, who's a male, versus she's a woman and she's really in charge of her life in a way that someone like Britney Spears, who is her contemporary, wasn't able to be. And it's all just, maybe it was their personality, maybe it was the aspirations they had or the people they had around them. But I think people or stars, like musicians like Beyonce, who had an idea of who they wanted to be as an artist. And she is multifaceted. She's not just putting out certain type of music, but she's also, yeah, she does use her sexuality, but it's not like how it was with Britney. Britney was 15 and they were sexualizing her, versus Beyonce started doing this in her 30s. So it's completely different. So I think that there has been a change. I don't think that women are treated now, depending on their level of success and the level of autonomy they have. I think if you have the right people around you, you're able to be in control of what you want to put out there. But I still think that, you know, Britney Spears now just ended her conservatorship, but you have Kanye West doing the exact same things and he's running rampant and no one's, you know, doing something about him. So I think we still have the same problem, that women are treated differently in the music industry, unfortunately.
And you make a good point with the Kanye, Britney Spears comparison. You know, when you look at the behaviors and you start to wonder what's going on, it would be interesting to see what would happen with Kanye down the line. I'm going to go to you, Vivian. Musically speaking, when you look at women in the music industry, when you were growing up to the present day, do you feel like there were any major differences or any changes?
I mean, for sure, you mentioned, of course, the visuals. So if you're just going to talk about the style of dress and the amount of clothes on stage, you know, I sound like an old grandma, but, you know, it is sometimes a little surprising and jarring, and seeing some of the, you know, dance moves that are being done. I mean, and my girls both did dance and they did hip hop and they did all kinds of, you know, different moves that even as young girls, you'd see on his big stage dance competition. You'd sometimes wonder if it was a little much, but yeah, for me, I think some of it has gone a little too far, but I also understand that people have the right to express themselves creatively, and I'm not judgmental of it. But for me personally, yeah, I think it's maybe gone a little farther than it needs to. And whether that's the artist's choice or what they're being told is popular and they should do, I don't know. But I think it should be commended, the artists that are kind of forging their own path, and some of them that are saying, and of course it comes with level of success, you have that power. Some of the artists who are taking back their voice and their artistic vision and doing things in their own way, because they feel that that's what they want to put out. And so I think that's a really interesting time that we're in, as far as women who are killing it are getting to call the shots now.
Yeah, and you definitely make a important point. When I think about the visual right now, sometimes I find myself, I got to cover my eyes a bit because I'm like, it's a little bit much, not really what I need. Let me go to you, Kim. What are your thoughts on the music industry right now when it comes to women and the visuals?
Well, I cover my eyes a little bit like you sometimes, but then I also think to myself, one of my favorite artists, Elton John, and look at what he did when he first splashed, right? Even Lady Gaga, sometimes people have to be a little out there to get the attention, so then their talent can come through, and then they have the power and ability to come first with their talent. So let's hope that's what a lot of that is, first. And so, well, I'll give them that credit.
I definitely appreciate that. I will go to you, Bob. What are your thoughts on the visuals you're seeing today versus during your upbringing when it comes to women in the music industry?
Well, I think more is in the open now. What we didn't know was how controlling the producers and managers were of all artists, not just women, but especially women. And I think the women have to be aware of, especially men trying to take advantage of them from a sexual perspective. Um, Sexuality sells. And so people dress to sell their music and write. And some of the music, I just can't imagine it being sold. But people like it. And so I think generally speaking, women have more respect now. You have people who want to own their own songs and write their own songs and are excellent musicians, and they may have been kept back years ago.
Right. And you definitely say something important there is people are taking control, even if the narrative was sex sells back when. Now the women have more of an opportunity to take control of that narrative, and if that's what they want to push, they can make that choice. Versus back when you would think more women are doing certain things so that they can get an opportunity. All right, we're rounding down on our time. I'm going to go to you, Gary, for some last thoughts on women in the music industry and some of the visual, and then I'll go to Kristen to close us out.
Yeah, so on this topic, I just think it's a double-edged sword because you have extremely talented women like Meg Thee Stallion, but her whole paradigm of marketing is more sexual, like the song like WAP. But she's an extremely talented lyrical rapper, so it all depends on like the marketing scheme and if that is actually something that she wants to do. But you didn't at the same time you still have like a rapper like a young MA, who is not, in the traditional sense of sexual woman as far as visuals and such, but she's still creating a lane for herself. So women do have that option now. But I am seeing that if you do exploit the sexual side of things, you may have a better shot at getting the big name and then, going back to your art and your craft. But at least I think in today's world, as Bob was saying, women are more respected. So it's not as, looked down upon, but there's just more options in that space. So I think it's a positive thing.
You're on mute.
Thank you so much for that, Gary, and definitely appreciate each of you and your responses during this panel event. Thank you to Janice in the chat. Bravo to the entire panel. Great job, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and kick it back to you, Kristen, so that we can start to close out and do closing remarks from each speaker.
Awesome. So I'm just thinking about this idea and the concept of remaining civil in all of this. And one thought that comes to my mind, if you look at this panel, we are all different from different backgrounds, different genders, but we're coming together. And the idea is to remain civil, remain professional. And when I think of Women's History Month, and all of the strides that not just women made and the efforts that women made, but men as well to be where we are today. I think of Betty White as an example, God rest her soul, but just the things that I can imagine she would have gone through during her time in being one of the trailblazers for equality. I also think of Dr. King in the concept of judging a person based on their what's on the inside, opposed to what's on the outside. And I think that as we continue on in 2022 and in the future, that if we continue to keep those concepts and those ideas, America being a melting pot of all different cultures, all different ethnicities and diversities, it's a beautiful thing and it should be embraced. And I see it moving towards that. And, just going back to Women's History Month, I do see, us moving in a positive direction, and it makes me excited. So at this point, I want to just go to our panelists for any last comments. I will start with Kim. Do you have any last comments?
On civility, I think it's very important that we keep in mind that civility and being civil in our professions is not a sign of weakness. It is a calculated, productive way to obtain a client's goals, to obtain your own goals. So it is certainly not weakness, and it should be seen as something that is necessary as well as productive and will assist you in getting your goals and your clients' goals. And thank you again for the opportunity to be here this evening.
Thank you, Kim. Bob, any last minute thoughts or comments?
I would urge everybody to continue your education process, to learn new skills, how to do things differently. We're talking about civility tonight. You can learn to be more civil, and you don't have to do things the way they used to be done. You can learn from other people, learn from people who are very good at being civil, and teach others to be civil. So I'm a huge proponent for continuing education, not just going to the bar website and downloading something just to get credits. Pursue your area of the law and look for programs that can develop your civility and your skills as a human being.
That's amazing. Thank you, Bob. Fernanda.
So I'll just quote Ruth Ginsburg. You can be without being disagreeable. And I think if you, live your life and or engage in your profession with that proverb, I think that's the appropriate way to just handle anything, because we're all different and we're all going to have different perspectives, but it doesn't mean that we have to disrespect each other. And especially when you're in the legal profession or any type of profession, it's easier to kill people with kindness. And like Bob said, you won't die of a heart attack if you do it that way.
Thanks, Fernanda. Vivian, any last minute comments?
I'm just going to tie in a little bit since you were asking me some questions about the Judicial Nominating Commission and Women's History Month and civility all in one. That one of the positives that I've seen is a lot of female candidates for judicial office. We've had, the majority of the candidates have been women the last few cycles, and the majority of names sent up to the governor have been women. So that's very positive. And then as far as the civility, that is something that we look at when we do vet our candidates. We're looking at how candidates have conducted themselves in court with opposing counsel. What is their reputation in the community? So that civility comes around for sure there, and we're looking for people that are going to be civil on the bench. So civility and humility, which I think they both go hand in hand. It's hard to be civil if you don't have humility. So I think both of those are important to remember.
Awesome. Great advice. And last but definitely not least, Gary, any last minute thoughts or comments?
Yeah, civility, although I'm in the family law space, civility is still important in the corporate law space as well, and in general practice of law. As you know, we're all diverse. Those who are not well represented in the legal profession, civility definitely helps to create a space for us to feel accepted, feel comfortable, and still be professional, and represent our clients to the best of our ability. Definitely, it's on Women's History Month, so just a shout out to the women in the legal profession. A lot of women in the legal profession have helped me as far as growth and opportunities as well. So definitely appreciate that, and just leave with that.
Awesome. Thanks, Gary. Sandy, I'll turn it back over to you for final remarks.
Okay, so we thank you each so very much for joining us tonight for this important Women's History Month panel discussion, including diverse views from both men and women. Civility Wins, Find Your Peace While Taming the Beast is our book project that will launch soon. And we have decided to use our YouTube channel as a means of talking about different topics and tying in civility at all times. So we definitely ask that each and every one of you go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Follow us on Instagram at Civility Wins Series, and please share this video. We thank each and every one of our panelists for taking the time out tonight to share their diverse perspectives in this conversation. And we look forward to having a conversation with you all again soon. Next week, we will have a fresh new panel of speakers to talk about some of the topics that we talked about tonight, but also tacking on a few new topics as well. So you all are more than welcome to join us and tune in to the broadcast right here on our YouTube channel, Civility Wins.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody. I hope you have a great night. And please, speakers, you can stay on as we close this broadcast out. Give me just one moment. Yes.